That's JT Westerso of Locked On Utes. Las Vegas. Las Vegas, JT. They like to make money. They want to make lines that make them money. They don't want to push this. I say, and this is not even political, election lines. Okay, you see somebody as a big favorite in an election when it comes to Las Vegas, where the money is. That's what you can track to see how legitimate a lot of things are at that level, because there are real dollars involved and no one wants to lose. So insider trading is done in a lot of these Las Vegas lines. So to see Utah, some sportsbooks picking Utah as their Big 12 champion, or ESPN picking them in the college football playoff, winners of the Big 12. How did we get here? They were 5-7 last season, and we still don't know exactly what they're going to look like next year, whereas in Iowa State has a pretty clear look to them. How did we get here?
I think we got here by looking at the past history of this conference and appreciating that it is the most unpredictable conference in the Big 12. Understandably, because of how Utah was last year. Drake, I think there's people that share your sentiments that you shared on your own show last week when talking about this, where you said, as stupid as that sounds, when talking about Utah being the favorite among Big 12 teams. But if we look at the history of this conference, first of all, we can even start with Arizona State or even Iowa State by this example. There has not been a team to make the conference championship game in back-to-back years since Colorado did it in 2004 and 2005. In fact, the last just member in the Big 12 to make a conference championship game back-to-back years, that would be the Utah Utes 21-22, in which they were able to win it. So outside of those top teams, how can we also then look at the rest of the conference and how it's going to go out? Texas Tech had a strong year. BYU, right? We already mentioned Arizona State a little bit. Well, there's something that bears keeping in mind, and that's something that Bill Conley in his ESPN article does discuss. That's the regression we often see in one-score games on a year-to-year basis. And this is something that tracks year after year. If you go back to 2021, Oklahoma State and Baylor went a combined 10-3 in one-score games. What happened the next year? Then they were a combined 13-13. 22, TCU's magical run. They were 6-1 in one-score games, and then they didn't make a bowl game. And then how about in 2023, you see teams that were 5-1 and then they didn't win like Oklahoma State. Then they didn't win a conference game this year. So what teams could that be? Texas Tech 6-1, Iowa State 5-1, ASU 6-2, BYU 4-2 in those one-score games. A lot of times those margins you see them flip. Two teams that were very bad in them: Utah, Kansas, 1-5. And a team like Utah, they lost 5 games by a combined 23 points. And every single one of those losses was a game in the fourth quarter. I'll talk about why I think Utah specifically could be the bounce back candidate. But if you look at the history of this conference, expecting the top to resembling what it was a season ago, usually a mistake based on what actually plays out.
As you know, I picked Utah and Kansas in my Big 12 title last year, and both of those schools had plenty of one-score games they were on the opposite side of. Are you saying, at least based on trends, it's what it sounds like, that Utah and Kansas are the two teams that everyone should be high on in 2025?
I think they're the two teams everyone should be high on to bounce back in a major way in this conference. Look, this is Locked On Utes, so I'm going to talk about the Utah perspective. What was the biggest reason Utah was bad last year? They had bad quarterback play. They got Devin Dampier, who led college football in yards per rush. All players, like even running backs included. No one ran for more yards last year than Devin Dampier. So you're like, okay, that's one thing, but can he throw? Well, he had overall, 3,934 total yards, 31 touchdowns too. So he was an incredibly dynamic player. 58, this is a great stat that I found on X. 58 players threw for at least 2,500 passing yards in college football. 36 FBS player ran for 1,000 yards. Only one did both. That's Devin Dampier. He did it in Jason Beck's offense. Jason Beck led the 4th best offense in college football a year ago with Dampier at the helm. That is now Utah's offensive coordinator. The two of them combining. Wayshawn Parker, the transfer running back from Washington State, was pretty much everyone's a top 5 running back transfers. That's a big ad.
Utah number 1 for some, no doubt.
Yeah, Utah returns all 5 starters up front. One of the best tackle duos in college football. And just because you return all 5 up front, I will say that doesn't mean you're always going to be good, because we saw what happened to Oklahoma State. But I do feel really good about 3 to maybe even 4 of those pieces coming back for Utah. It's not the greatest group of wide receivers. I can admit that right away. But the strength of this team is going to be the running game, and there are at least capable guys who can make some plays on the outside. Then the defense. Look, last year, 2nd in the conference, only allowing 20 points per game. They returned 3 of their best 4 linebackers from a year ago, 2 of their 4 best interior defensive tackles, only 1 of their top 3 defensive ends. That's when we need people to step up. 3 of their 4 best safeties, then 2 of their best 4 corners. So then you go, okay, do you trust Utah's developmental history? Well, Drake, Utah has more players drafted in the NFL over the last decade than any other Big 12 program. And 13 of the last 14 Super Bowls, Utah has been represented in. Kyle Whittingham's a heck of a head coach. Morgan Scalley is one of the best defensive coordinators. Jason Beck's coming off a heck of a year. I trust this Utah program to bounce back in 25.
I don't think Dalton Kincaid has made any of those Super Bowls, right?
No, he hasn't.
It's tough. Other Utah players not named Dalton Kincaid have been in that bunch over the last, 14 years? 14 years?
13 of the last 14. Yeah, like this
14.
year, Britton Covey, they're the fun punt returner.
Yeah. Utah Utes. This is to me, the parity of the league stands out first, where you could say next year, hey, Arizona will take a step up. Why? That's the Big 12. But why? No, it's just kind of the Big 12. Okay, but what are the reasons? Nah, because 3-9 Arizona State. You're like, well, they have a couple guys returning. Cam Scadaboo is good, and Sam Levitt's unproven, but he could. There were so many what ifs. So it was really hard preseason to jump on the bandwagon of Arizona State, and there would not be a way a year ago for you to justify to me Arizona State going to the college football playoff. It would be idiotic. Then, because the nature of development in this conference, they wind up going from 16-1, winning the league, going to the Big 12 championship. Do you think that, and this is a hard question to reckon with for me, but I want to pitch it to you. Do you believe Utah today is in a better spot than Arizona State was a year ago, remembering how improbable them winning the conference was on February 4th of 2024?
I've made this point several times on my show, Drake. They are undoubtedly in a better position than Arizona State was. Arizona State lost in Rice-Eccles Stadium the previous year before they just went on this run, 55-3. Like embarrassed, outclassed everything. And a year later, they win the whole conference. Like that is an insane turnaround.
And beat Utah on the way, by the way. Yeah.
Exactly. They did. And I just laid out all the reasons why I think this Utah team can bounce back, but I just think they are clearly better on paper. They have more going for them. We thought higher of, I know he's coming off a down year. We still think higher of Kyle Whittingham right now than we did Kenny Dillingham a year ago. We all liked Kenny Dillingham, but the resume wasn't there. We all liked Cam Scadaboo. I didn't see him being what I would call maybe the second best back in all of college football, only behind Genty. So there were just so many pieces in an improbable way. That's why I look at a Utah and a Kansas as the two I mentioned, like, hey, there's just a lot to like about those teams on paper. And also, I mean, one thing that goes along with Utah too is, look, I know last year the home field, they didn't perform great at home field. If you look at their body of work, they have won. The last time they lost at home to an unranked team was 2017. And even they had a stretch where they were undefeated at home for years until finally Oregon toppled them before the previous season. So it's a really good home field advantage that Utah has too. I feel better about several teams right now currently than I did to win the Big 12 this year than I did about Arizona State last year.
JT, where can folks find more of your work?
You guys can head over to Locked On Utes on X, keeping all the things latest Utah content going, and make sure you guys like and subscribe. Also, my personal handle at JT Wistersill. Drake, always fun joining you and looking forward to the Big 12 show later this week, too.
Absolutely. Thursday night that will release. We'll talk Big 12 schedule release that is coming out soon, maybe out by the time you're watching this. This has been, it always will be, a crossover between Locked On Utes and Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.